Another strategy is to think about how we can build context and purpose for writing. So this example is from a 7th grade workshop I taught about writing children's books. So we analyzed children's books, we looked at the content of children's books, we looked at the language used in children's books, and then my students had to write their own. And so for this particular project, they had to pick a preschool or kindergarten class in their community, and most of them chose people like their cousins or their brothers, younger brothers and sisters, and then they had to write a children's book for that audience. So here are a few examples of the final pages of books that my students wrote. On the left we have the culminating proposal from a Cinderella story that a student wrote. She called it a ghetto Cinderella story, and it was about a young woman who she meets her prince. Her name is Shaquita, and she meets her prince, who's a DJ, and you can see in this scene he proposes over the phone to her. So it's a modern urban take on the Cinderella story. And then the other story is called the Dissandra story, and in that story, a student is being bullied because she doesn't dress popularly, and then she goes to the school nurse who helps her, and in the end, she becomes one of the popular kids. So those are just a few examples from that workshop that show how students put together children's books that were for kids they knew and that drew on the concerns that they had as middle schoolers. Another strategy is shared writing and revision, and so for this strategy, you would have a rough draft of a text that you might work through. In this image, we can see the teacher is using smartboard technology to actually edit and revise the text in real time as an entire group. And so this is a great example of a teacher doing some guided practice around revision in a particular genre with a group of students. Another strategy is cross-genre revision. So for this particular strategy, you take a text that's in one genre and then ask students to revise it to other genres. And there are some great texts that model this. One, it's kind of an older text, but I think it's still relevant, is called Exercises in Style. And so in that book, there's one event that happens, and then it's told through, I think it's like 20 or 30 different genres. So there's an example of a telegraph and a notation, and then it goes on and on and on. For this particular book, I would take some of the drawings that are in the book out if I was using it with middle school or high school students, but it would be more appropriate for the college level as is. And then a more contemporary book that does this is Matt Madden's 99 Ways to Tell a Story, and he actually does a comic book version of the same thing, where he takes a single set of events and then turns it into different genres along the way. And then the final point I want to make is that it's important to think about testing as a genre and working with students around how they can approach various assessments, especially large-scale assessments, systematically, and understanding what those particular genres are looking for from them as readers and writers. And so this example is from the PEAKS English Language Arts Assessment, which is the new Alaska assessment within the last few years. So take a moment to read through this question and think about what are the genre-based aspects of summary that you would work with your students to help them pick out the correct answer to this question. So pause the recording now. So some of the things you might have written about are things like identifying important points, eliminating irrelevant information, being accurate, connecting your summary to the original text. So some of those are things that you might have written about in that response. And then the last example from testing I'd like you to look at is from a science question that requires writing. So how would you work with a student to figure out the genre expectations of this particular test question? Pause the recording now. So some of the things you might have written about are things like how to incorporate data, how to write sentences that take the data and answer the question directly, so incorporating the question into your answer. And then the final thing I always work with students on is filling up the space. So if a test gives you one line, you fill up that one line. If they give you 6 pages, you fill up the 6 pages. Or if they give you 3 lines, you fill up the 3 lines. And often students will perform better on the assessment if they fill up the space that's given to them.